So, thank you so much for coming and chatting with me today, Tess Merlin. Now, first off, Merlin is a fantastic surname.
Oh, thank you. Very magical.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I love it too.
But everyone watching, you'll see that Tess is not actually on camera, and there's a reason for this. Please tell me about this intense book, Rank.
So it's about a lot of things. It's about what it was like to be one of the early policewomen back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s. I'm sorry to have to admit I'm that old, but
Never apologise for experience.
It was tough. But I had the added, factor, degree of difficulty of having, during a time when I was sent to one station in particular, I was stalked. As a young policewoman, I didn't know people, I didn't know anyone in the town, I didn't have people to go to support me. And so the effect of that stalking, whilst what I went through is nowhere near as bad as what I have written about in the book here, it does still, it affects you forever, I think, and I have that reluctance to go on social media in a big way. Yeah.
It is, honestly, social media is one of the best stalking tools that you can use. I've found women in particular utilise it a lot for these sorts of things, but you'll find stuff on your ex-boyfriend or his new girlfriend and all of that stuff. But that just means that it's so possible to use it for such nefarious purposes.
Yes, I think we've all used it to just check on someone, to find someone that you'd like to make contact with.
Yes, someone from primary school, from way back when.
Yeah, perfectly right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that people use it on celebrities a lot.
Yes.
This is something that I was talking about with one of the cybersecurity guys. He works as an ethical hacker. Which was a really fascinating topic. But so go and see that in one of the other interviews. But he was saying that, we were discussing how when a lot of authors start their journey with a dream of becoming really famous, becoming the new J.K. Rowling, becoming the new like Tolkien or George Martin, and that sort of stuff, but they don't realise that comes with a cost. That fame and that exposure comes with a cost of everyone knowing your business and also feeling like they know you and you have no idea who they are at all. So that parasocial relationship you build with your audience is really good for building an audience, but really damaging for your actual psyche.
Yes, it's a catch-22. It's I've been in business as well, and you just can't run a successful business without having a social media profile, that using those tools, and the same for as a writer. If you want to get your book out there, it's very difficult to do that. Excuse me.
No, go for it.
If you haven't, if you haven't got a profile.
Absolutely. What kind of business were you running?
Well, in the book here, I talk about that. So when I did leave the police force, I did a few things, but one of them was I ran a floristry business.
Oh, so lovely.
I was a florist. So I wanted to go from doing something quite tough and a lot of negativity, a lot of not nice things happening within that kind of career, into something that was absolutely the opposite, dealing with flowers and a lot of happy occasions. There was always the funerals, but mostly happy, pretty things.
Even funerals can be a celebration of the life that the person had. So, flowers, a huge change from being a cop. You're not just looking at blue and red.
It's a little bit different.
Oh, wow. So, what led you in your journey to write this?
That's such a big question. I think it's probably a big question for all authors. I didn't set out to write it. It wasn't my goal to write an autobiographical novel. And I think I've been a content writer also for quite some time. I've done technical writing.
These things lend themselves so well to writing actual stories.
Yeah, so you've got the skills, but I didn't think I had the ability to either write a memoir or a fiction. I think I would have thought that nobody would want to read a memoir. Like, who am I to write a memoir? I'm not famous, so why would anyone read it? So I crossed that off the list. But I was in a little bit of not a competition, but a little bit of a regular short story writing phase with my daughter. She started first, and she'd send them to me to proofread and kind of comment, and then she said, oh, you should have a go too. So I started having a go, and then it just went on from there, and I thought I'd probably enjoy to write more, like to not cut myself off at 500 words. So I thought, I'll write about something I know. So then I started it out as a crime fiction, and it stayed a crime fiction for 2 drafts, and then when I got to the 3rd one, I realised that a lot of what I'd written about in here was true. Like, it was my own experiences. All of what I'd written about the police days was true.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, why should I not own it? Why not just not have people think that was all made up? Just take ownership of it. So I did that then after the 3rd draft, and I added a few more little stories, and I was so much happier with how I felt.
Excellent.
And how it presented. Yeah, I just felt like it was real then. It was more, it still had the fiction interwoven throughout, but it was more about that.
It's all good. We're using a public space, so I think they were just coming in to check on us and be like, oh, okay. Or they wanted to have a meeting.
They might want the room.
they're filming for their own Writers' Festival. So, do you find that this is pure autobiographical, or do you find that you were able to add embellishments to areas to set the scene better for your readers?
Yeah. Because I'd written it as a crime fiction, firstly, I had a really good story running through it. So I had the past, which was, what it was, and then I had a contemporary story running alongside of it, and I didn't want to get rid of any of that because it was so good. So, well, that's in my opinion.
No, when you've got gold, you've got gold. Just acknowledge it.
Yeah, and it was also the opinion of my early readers, who said, this is good. So I didn't want to lose any of that. So then I had to find a genre where I could, fit it, where I could keep the fact and keep the fiction and just keep it all interwoven in there. Yeah. So that's why in here I've taken the stalking to a level that I didn't have to experience. So luckily, thankfully. Yes. But I wrote about it. I didn't use my name. I think I would have found it hard to write it about me. Yeah. So my main character had a different name, and I found that I could write it. Yeah. Treating it as a fiction, I could write it then. So it's very hard to say what's true and what's not, but probably 60% of it is factual. Yeah. And the extra part about how bad the stalking gets is fictional, and also a lot of the contemporary stories about online dating, and it's about that. That fear of having to put your face online to try and meet someone, and a lot of that is fictional. I did have a bit of a look after my divorce, but I got off pretty quickly. But yes, a lot of that part is fictional as well. Yeah. Mm.
That's so fascinating. It'd be so interesting to see what it was like to be one of the first female police officers, now just a police officer. Yeah. They really, I feel like because of the groundwork laid out by people like yourself, we have a position where there's so much more equality. There's always going to be issues, and I think that we constantly work on them, but it's so much better than what it was.
It is, but sadly, it's still there. Yeah. You hear about it, and we've only just had the inquiry into the Queensland Police Service.
Yes, I remember there was the
misogyny, the racism, and the sexual harassment, and that to know that is still going on, and it's probably still at quite a bad level. It was worse. So when you know what's going on now, and you think back at how much worse it was when we first started, it is pretty scary. Yeah. And it was something that I suppose at the time, because you had nothing to gauge it against, and it was just the way things were, you almost accepted it as normal, you know.
Yeah.
It was, yeah. Now when I look back, when I write about it, I think, oh my goodness. There were times I stood up, and thankfully I did, but times when you knew you couldn't, because the ramifications would have been get transferred out to the back of nowhere.
Get to whoop whoop.
Yep.
Yep.
And love it or leave, you know, like resign.
Yeah. Gosh, it's so rough. It's so rough. And I think that whenever I hear anyone being a bit of an anti-feminist, I think of things like that. I think of how far we've come in such a short amount of time.
Yes.
Like that was only, I was going to say 30 years ago, it's now 50 years ago. 40 years ago for the 80s. For the 80s it was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But to me it's still 20 years ago.
It is still 20 years ago, really. I mean, I've got a little brief history at the start of the book about when women first came into the police force, and it was only in 1965 that we were given the same powers as men. They were there just for, you know, very minimal duties prior to 1965. So.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that's not that long ago when you look at it.
And I think women came in first, and then they started letting Indigenous men into the force as well, didn't they? It was one way or the other. They started letting, but it was around the same time.
Yes.
So we've had this deeply people think, oh, why is society so bad? And they go about like, oh, why is misogyny so bad? And why is the patriarchy ruling and everything? It's like, well, we only started dealing with these things properly after hundreds of years of like a terrible reinforcement in these areas.
Yes.
We've only started dealing with them properly in the last 50 to 100 years. And we had to fight tooth and nail for every single tiny inch we got.
Exactly.
So yeah, my mum did women's studies for her teaching degree, so I got raised with these sorts of things.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Hopefully you got brothers that got raised with it too.
No.
What a shame.
No, they got raised in Perth. So.
Oh, okay.
But this looks like such a fascinating story, and the interwoven fiction and non-fiction. It's like a slice of history. Coloured.
Yes, well, there's all these new genre coming up now, you know, like faction and...
oh my gosh, I've not heard of that one, faction.
Yeah, and you know, like when I was trying to present it as a crime fiction, and then I realised it was not that, I thought, well, what do you call that? And so I'm thinking, can you have a fictionalised memoir? And I started doing some research, and then I remembered that I'd read Trent Dalton's Boy Swallows Universe, and I remembered that was partly fact and partly fiction. I thought, well, what did he call it? So I had a look, and as well as being called an autobiographical novel, it was called a coming of age, because it was that kind of thing. This is not. This is just dead set autobiographical novel. So there it was. So I found the little niche.
Wonderful. Oh, what a powerful journey.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to talking about it at the Logan Riders Festival.
It's going to be fantastic.
So talking to people and meeting people. And when you do, honestly, when I have gone to events and spoken, I have had so many women come up to me who want to tell me their story, and so many of us have a story about not just, well, it doesn't have to be stalking, it's just even just an occasion or many occasions where you have to change your behaviour, change the way you dress, change where you just feel safe to go. There's just so many stories out there.
It's too common. It's too common. I was nearly having a joke, because you don't joke about some of these things, you just cry. But I had a particularly frightening stalker, and then you start to see signs around your home or around things that you frequent, and you wonder, is that them?
Everything starts to you start to get, you notice things that you wouldn't have noticed, and
you start to put clues together that may not actually be clues, and makes you even more paranoid about it. For me, being able to set it aside and be like, if the cameras pick anything up, that's when I'll act. Like, if the cameras say anything has actually gone amiss, that's when I'll act.
Yeah.
But until then, I'm not going to live my life in fear.
And
I'm not going to, crawl under the windows to the front of the house. I'm not going to move around the house with no lights on. I'm not going to make sure that every time the dog barks that I'm at full attention. You've got to be able to still live.
That's right, and I'm sorry you've had to have an experience like that.
They were very unhinged. Fortunately, it had nothing to do with my writing. So, yeah, it was an old ex-friend that just drug spiraled.
That's often the way.
Yeah,
someone from the past.
Yeah.
But it's great that you've got the security, you've got
Yes.
the cameras, these days we can do that.
Nothing is more of a deterrent than a big dog.
Yeah, big dog, I like that too.
And I think, a lot of these people spiral out of reality as well. So I found that he can't even remember my first name. So he can't remember my full name. I don't think he remembers where I live or anything like that. He remembers my gaming username because that pops up in places for him. So it's interesting. For me, I'm lucky that he's unhinged enough to be completely off the door frame. But I think that having friends around you, having people that you can lean on and feel safe around is so important.
Good on you for being so brave and living your life.
I don't let anyone tell me what to do.
That's it. That's the way.
Yeah, he got 3 days out of me, and I was like, no, cameras.
That's it. Yeah.
Get the dog on alert. And that was it. Yeah, there's nothing more abhorrent than having someone try and control you, even if it's just in your own mind.
Well, yeah. So I just applaud you for being so brave, and now we have the options. We've got. We can get the good security.
Yes.
Stalking is an offence now.
Yes.
Whereas before, it was only made an offence in 1993.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So.
Oh my God.
Prior to that, and when I was being stalked, you couldn't do anything about it except until they actually committed an offence, assault or something like that. So. At least stalking, that's some progress. It is unlawful stalking as an offence.
1993?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's almost 2000, so it's not that long ago.
No, that's, that's 30 years ago.
Years, yeah.
Stop it, it's 10 years ago.
Well, feels like it.
I can't believe, it baffles me that when you hear these laws that have come into things what feels like so late.
Yes.
We've made so much progress. In Australia, in particular, we've made so much progress as a society. And I think we find ways to take action on these things. Like the government's domestic violence leave, paid domestic violence leave to help women and men get out of these terrible situations.
Yes.
And then you've got so many avenues that you can go and get support from.
Yes.
And I always find that if the person that you're speaking to doesn't give you that support, just go and speak to another person.
Yes,
keep speaking to someone until you get the support you need.
Yes, and that was the thing. Until it was made an offence, you couldn't do anything with the police in regard to it, but you also couldn't get that support because it wasn't considered an offence. So.
That's crazy.
But I'm glad you mentioned men there because it's not just women.
No.
Yeah, it's men who have also, probably obviously to a lesser degree, but these things happen to men as well. Bias and sexual harassment, other things, racism. But I did want to say also that the book, I had my early readers were a balance of men and women, and this book appeals to men and women. So it's
wonderful.
it's not a rant.
Yep.
It's not a rant about how hard it was in the boys' club and all that. I made sure that it wasn't that. So yeah, it will appeal to a broad audience.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I am so pleased to have you at the Writers' Festival. So you will be able to come and listen to Tess on the 9th and 10th of June. I can get the dates right.
Yes.
9th and 10th of June at the Logan West Community Centre. And you'll be able to pick up a copy of Rank from Tess Merlin and hopefully get it signed.
Yes, definitely.
on those days. So make sure that you come in, you listen to these fantastic talks, and you take away all the information that you possibly can. And we will see you in June.